Chapter 3 and Song 3 Summary. Boethius is still bothered by the contradiction he sees between philosophy's teaching on God's foreknowledge of all things and on the existence of free will. If God accurately foresees every event, what he foresees will infallibly happen, which means man cannot have free will. Some argue that the inevitability of an action causes God's foreknowledge. But those events are still necessary, and thus, in either case, free will is impossible. Also, if God's decrees are that events may or may not happen, what kind of foreknowledge is that? But if his foreknowledge is certain, where is human freedom? The moral result is catastrophic. Good cannot be truly rewarded or evil punished because people act out of necessity, not their own choice. Virtue and vice would cease to exist. Further, vice would be attributed to God, since he is the cause of all things. The practical result is destructive. Hope and prayer are both pointless. And since prayer is the only interaction people can have with God, we would thus be unable to be joined to him, cut off from our source of life. Chapter 3. Then I told her, but another problem, an even more difficult problem, perplexes me. What is it? She asked, but I think I can guess. It seems, I answered, too much of a paradox and a contradiction that God could know all things, and that free will could exist. For if God foresees everything, and nothing deceives him, what Providence foresees will happen must necessarily happen. So, if from eternity he foreknows not only what people will do, but also their designs and purposes, there can be no freedom of the will, since nothing can be done, nor can any sort of purpose exist, except what divine Providence, who cannot be deceived, has perceived in advance. For if they can be turned aside to some other direction than what Providence has foreseen, then no sure foreknowledge of the future can exist, but uncertain conjecture instead. But it is wicked to think such things of God. Further, I do not approve of the reasoning by which some think they can solve this puzzle. For they say that it is not because God has foreseen an event that it therefore must come to pass, but conversely, because something is about to come to pass, it cannot be hidden from divine providence. That moves the necessity to the other side. So it is not that what is foreseen must necessarily come to pass, but that what is about to come to pass must necessarily be foreseen. But this is just as if the matter in debate were which is the cause and which the effect, whether foreknowledge of the future is the cause of the necessity or the necessity the cause of the foreknowledge. Instead, I am trying to demonstrate that whatever the order of causes is, the occurrence of things foreseen is necessary, even though the foreknowledge of future events does not in itself impose necessity on their occurrence. For example, if a man is sitting down, the premise that he is seated is necessarily true. And on the other hand, if the premise that he is seated is true, because he is sitting down, he must necessarily be seated. So in either case, some necessity is involved. In the latter case, the necessity of the fact, in the former, of the truth of the statement. But in both cases, the one sitting is not therefore seated because the opinion is true, but rather the opinion is true because he was already seated. So even though the cause of the truth of the opinion comes from only one side, yet both sides share a necessity. We can obviously reason similarly in the case of providence and the future. Even if future events are foreseen because they are about to happen, and do not come to pass because they are foreseen, still, all the same, there is a necessity, both that they should be foreseen by God as about to happen, and that when they are foreseen, they should happen. That is sufficient to destroy free will. Besides, it is preposterous to speak of the occurrence of events in time as the cause of eternal foreknowledge. But if we believe that God foresees future events because they are about to come to pass, what are we doing but thinking that the occurrence of events causes his supreme providence? Further, just as when I know that anything is, that thing necessarily is, So, when I know that anything will be, it will necessarily be. Therefore, things that are foreknown must inevitably come to pass. Lastly, if you think that anything exists in any way other than what it is, your opinion is not only not knowledge, but also false opinion, far removed from the truth of knowledge. Consequently, if anything is about to happen, and yet its occurrence is not certain and necessary, how can anyone foreknow that it will occur? For just as knowledge itself is unmixed with falsehood, so any understanding drawn from knowledge cannot be either than as it is understood. For this, indeed, is the reason knowledge is free from falsehood. Of necessity, each thing must correspond exactly with the knowledge that understands it. In what way, then, should we suppose that God foreknows these uncertainties as about to come to pass? For if he thinks that events that may not happen at all are inevitably destined to come to pass, he is deceived. And this is not only wicked to believe, but even to express in words. If, on the other hand, he sees them in the future as they are, and so knows that they may equally come to pass or not, what sort of foreknowledge would that be, comprehending nothing certain or solid? How is that better than the absurd prophecy of the blind soothsayer Tiresias? Whatever I say will either come to pass or not. In that case, too, how would divine providence surpass human opinion if it calls uncertain things whose occurrence is uncertain, like people do? But if no shadow of uncertainty can darken that perfectly sure source of all things, then the occurrence of those things he has surely foreknown is certain. Therefore, there can be no freedom in human actions and designs. Rather, the divine mind, which foresees all things without possibility of mistake, ties and binds them down to a single result. But once we admit this, how disrupted human affairs become! Vainly are rewards and punishments proposed for the good and bad, since no free and voluntary movement of the will has deserved either one or the other. No, the punishment of the wicked and the reward of the righteous, which is now considered the perfection of justice, will seem the most flagrant injustice, since people are compelled to act either way, not by their own proper volition, but by the necessity of what must surely be. And therefore neither virtue nor vice matters, for merits are mixed together without distinction. Further, since the whole course of events is derived from providence, and nothing is left free to human design, our vices also would be ascribed to the author of all good. And no thought more abominable than that can possibly be conceived. That would leave us no reason to hope or pray. For how can we hope for blessings or pray for mercy when everything we want depends on the links of an unalterable chain of causes? Gone, then, is the one means of communication between God and humanity, the communion of hope and prayer, if it is true that we ever earn the priceless reward of divine favor by showing proper humility. This is the one way by which people seem able to hold communion with God, and are joined to his unapproachable light by the act of humble prayer, even before he gives them what they request. Then, since these means can scarcely be believed to have any power, if we admit the necessity of future events, how can we be brought near and cling to him who is the supreme head of all? The human race, as you sang a while ago, would helplessly fall to ruin, divided and cut off from its source. Song 3. Truth's Paradoxes. Why does a strange discordance break the ordered scheme's fair harmony? Has God decreed between two truths there may such lasting warfare be, that truths, each individually plain, we strive to reconcile in vain? Or is the discord not in truth, since truth is self-consistent ever, but, close in fleshly wrappings held, the blinded human mind can never discern, so faint her candle shines, the subtle chain that all combines? Ah, then why burns the restless mind truth's hidden portals to unclose? Knows he already what he seeks? Why toil to seek it if he knows? Yet if he comprehends it not, why blindly seek he knows not what? Who for a good he knows not sighs? Who can an unknown end pursue? How find? How if, by chance, he finds, hail that strange form he never knew? Or is it that man's inmost soul once knew each part, and knew the whole? Now, though by fleshly vapors dimmed, not all forgot her visions past. For while the separate parts are lost, she grasps the whole, and holds it fast. So he who yearns the truth to find is neither sound of sight nor blind. For neither does he know in full, nor is he bare of knowledge quite. But holding still to what is left, he gropes in the uncertain light, and by the part that still survives, to win back all he bravely strives.